All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I know there's a lot of pretty cool stuff going on right now, so I'm honored that you'd make it to this one. My name is Seth King, and I'm not a developer. I've been asked that a lot. I don't develop any software. I'm just an average guy who really likes to use free software. So that's the perspective you're getting from. The first thing I like to do to start off is just quick show of hands. Ask everybody here, would you personally wear a wire for the feds? Like, I want to know, raise your hand if you would wear a wire on your body, go into a family member's house, go into a friend's house, and wear a wire. Just go ahead and raise your hands. Anybody? Anybody here? Okay, we got one person playing the, all right. Nobody here would wear a wire. Okay, now let me rephrase the question a little bit. What if it were just really convenient in your life for you to wear a wire? What if, like, you know, if you didn't wear the wire, your life would just be that much more inconvenient? Like, you know, things took longer, you had to go out of your way a little bit. What if it was just really inconvenient for you to not wear a wire for the feds? Would you do it then? Then would you wear the wire in your family and friends' houses? Nobody? Nobody here would wear a wire. Okay, we got one guy who's kind of like, maybe. All right, we'll get to that topic later, okay? But I just want you to remember that nobody here really raised their hand and said, yeah, I'd wear a wire into my family and friends, you know, houses for the feds. So just remember that, okay? So to start off with, I'd like to tell everybody what free software is, because there's a lot of people who still don't really know what free software is. When I say the terms free software to a lot of people, they think it doesn't cost anything. But free software actually has nothing to do with the cost of the software, okay? Free software is often referred to as open source software, and I'm not going to get into a big debate about which term is better to use and why. That's a really niche topic that doesn't belong here, okay? But when I say free software, it means basically the same thing as open source software. Free software, what I'm talking about is free as in freedom. I'm not talking about free as in price. Another way to say it is you might say libre software as opposed to gratis software. So there could be a price on free software, but most of the time it doesn't have any cost. But I'm not talking about cost-free software. I'm talking about free as in freedom. Okay. So now let me tell you what's dependent for free software to be free software. It has to meet certain specifications for it to be free software. Okay, and the first one is the users have to have the freedom to run the program for any purpose. Okay, that means that you can say what you want, you can do what you want, anytime you want, anywhere. Okay, there's a lot of software that comes with stipulations. For example, maybe you buy some student software, okay, and you're not allowed to use it for commercial purposes, okay? That's not free software. That's proprietary closed source software. Maybe you're not allowed to put up dirty images on there, okay, like Facebook. If you post an image that Facebook doesn't like, you're going to get banned or something bad is going to happen to you, okay? That's not free software. So you have to be able to run the program in any way you see fit, okay? You don't have to ask anybody's permission to do so, all right? That's the first freedom of free software. The second freedom is the freedom to access and modify the source code. Okay, software is just a bunch of lines of code. It's written by developers, and that code needs to be accessible to everybody in the world, not just the users, not just other developers, everybody. Okay. Now, a lot of us, we're not going to necessarily be able to read the source code because we're not developers. But at least knowing that there's a lot of other people out there that can read it and that I can read it if I want to learn, it's available to me, okay? If you have code where you cannot inspect the source code, if you're not allowed to read the source code, that's not free software. That's closed source. That's proprietary software, okay? And I'll get into why that's really, really important freedom a little bit later. But I just want to let you know that if you can't read the source code, it's not free software. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have any cost. For example, Internet Explorer, okay? It doesn't cost you anything to get it, but you can't read the source code, so it's not free software. The third freedom with free software is the freedom to redistribute copies of the software, okay? I've downloaded a program, or I've bought a program or whatever, and I want to share it with my buddies. I want to share it with the whole world, okay? With free software, I can do that, and I don't ever have to worry about the guns of government coming and throwing me in a cage because I shared some programs, okay? With proprietary software, you can't do that. You're not allowed to share it. Only they can distribute it, okay? And if you do distribute it without their permission, you can be locked up in a cage, all right? With free software, you can distribute it anytime you want. The freedom to distribute copies is the last one that you modified, okay? So lots of times you'll get developers who will download a program, they'll have a program, and they'll say, hey, there's a little bug or something that they want to improve upon with the software. And they'll do that, and then they'll share it with their friends. So that's another thing, is not only can you share the original copy with your friends and anybody in the world, but you can modify the software and share that as well. So those are the 4 things of free software. It's not about the price. It's all about those specific freedoms, okay? So a lot of this really comes down to intellectual property. Now, a lot of people, minarchists specifically, but a lot of people believe in intellectual property. I used to too. For a long time, I used to really think that intellectual property was, you know, really important for innovation. It was really important for rights and all these things. It was important for capitalism. It wasn't until I read a book by Stephan Kinsella where he really just totally demolishes the legitimacy of intellectual property. So if you still believe in intellectual property, I don't know if you'd fully appreciate the free software, free software stance, but I would recommend you read a book called Against Intellectual Property. That will totally dispel any myths that you might have about the legitimacy of intellectual property. So that's what a lot of the freedoms come from. For example, the freedom to redistribute copies. Okay, the only reason why you ever have to worry about that is because of intellectual property laws that are backed up by the guns of government that are going to throw you in a cage for doing so. Okay, at the end of the day, if there were no government, if there was no intellectual property laws, the only thing you'd really be concerned about is, can I read the source code? Because if you don't ever have to worry about somebody throwing you in a cage for sharing the files or downloading it or anything like that, the only thing you really need to know is, hey, can I read the source code? Do I know what's in it? Can I change it? You know, that's about it. Okay, so now that we know what free software is, let's talk about what's wrong with closed source software. What's wrong with proprietary software? And really, we could have a field day talking about this. A lot of people in the free software movement for years and years and years have been talking about how dangerous proprietary software is. And they were called conspiracy theorists and kooks. But thank God for the Snowden revelations, because he's really opened up a lot of people's minds that, hey, he doesn't really talk about free software per se, but he talks about the effects of free software. And the effects of free software are the surveillance state. Okay, it's not just the fact that they're reading every single email out there. It's all sorts of things. Okay, for example, software is just a bunch of lines of code, and they can tell it to do whatever they want to. Okay, and you might have a program on your computer or on your smartphone that is a game, or it's Flash, or it's a web browser. It's something that just, it seems ostensibly it just does what you think it does. But really, in real life, this isn't conspiracy talk. This is just lines of code that every single program, even though it does what you think it does, it can do so much more. Okay? It can do it. For example, if you have a laptop and it has any bit of non-free software on that computer, okay, it can run the microphone when you do not think the microphone is running. It can run the webcam when you do not think the webcam is running, okay? Now let me ask you real quick, show of hands, who here thinks that the state would not, if they had the power to, which they do because it's just lines of code, if they had the power to, would not listen in on everybody's conversations in their house, would not watch everybody's webcam if they had the power to? I mean, this is like 1984 we're talking about, okay? This is exactly what Orwell predicted would happen, is that there would be these telescreens in people's houses, and they would listen to everything we're saying, and they would watch everything we're doing. And I remember reading that book 20 years ago thinking that would never happen. There's no way that people would let the government spy on them in their own homes. They would break those machines. Okay, well, guess what? They never had to pass a law. They never had to force the entire world to bring in the telescreens, to bring in the spy software into our homes. We went out and we paid hundreds of dollars and we brought them in voluntarily. We are the biggest dupes in the world. Okay? So this isn't like I said, thank God for the Snowden revelations, because he's shown us the documents. It's happening. They're doing it to everybody all the time. Back in the day, if they wanted to pinpoint somebody, if they wanted to go after somebody, they had to get a few goons, a few FBI or CIA goons, and they had to go to the house when they weren't home, and they had to implant some bugs or something, okay? But that's way costly. Now they can do it to 7 billion people. They can do it to anybody who has the software in their home. They can do it all the time for cheap. They don't even have to pay for the bugs. They don't have to pay for any goons to barge into your house and implant the chips. We paid for it ourselves. We brought them in all by ourselves. So it's there. It's happening. There's no disputing this anymore. Thankfully for the Snowden revelation. So just keep that in mind. That if you've got any non-free software running on any mobile device or even a desktop, that not only can they keylog. A keylogger is something that allows them to read everything you're typing. They can see everything that's on your computer screens. So everything that's on your computer screen, they can see. If you've got even the slightest bit of non-free software, it doesn't have to be a whole thing like Windows, or Macintosh, the operating system. I mean, it can be the stupidest little thing. Oh, I just installed this one little game or this one little toolbar extension. Anything. It's a potential vulnerability. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, one of the things a lot of people think, especially libertarians, and I used to think this too, is that for some reason corporations got a pass in my mind. It was like, okay, there's the government, and then there's businesses, and businesses are good, and we want to pay for their software, and that's capitalism. They make a product, they sell it to me, I pay for it. Okay. This is something I can't stress enough. There is not a single legal corporation in the world that will not genuflect for the state, period. If the state goes to any corporation and says, we want you to do this, they will do it. And if they do not, they will lose their business license. They will get audited from the IRS. They will get hounded until they are out of business. Look at LavaBit. Okay, LavaBit was just a regular old email provider. Okay, it happened to be the one Edward Snowden was using. And when the federal government wanted every little thing about all of LavaBit's files, they threatened him. And he went out of business. He said, "Look, I'm not going to give you all of Edward Snowden's files. I'm not going to do all this." So he'd rather quit and go out of business than give in to the feds. And that's what they do. There is not a billion-dollar corporation out there that didn't sell out for the feds. Okay, they're all sellouts. And a lot of libertarians, we used to, I don't think we do anymore, thank God, but a lot of libertarians, we like to lionize, really rich people that, have done a lot to provide something for the world, like Bill Gates or whatever. They're all sellouts. Every single one of them, okay? They had a choice early in the day. Way back in the day, they had a choice. Do I want to continue to do business, or do I want to install backdoors for the feds? And that's what they did. They all decided they had rather make the billions and install backdoors for the feds because, terrorism or some bullshit excuse that they gave us. That was it. So you cannot trust corporations, and there's a real good reason why you actually can't trust corporations, and that is because every single corporation is a legal entity. They've all established the willingness to obey the law, to pay the taxes, to get the licenses, to ask for permission to do business. Okay, I still personally wouldn't even trust an agorist business if they didn't release the source code and all this other stuff. But no, there isn't a corporation in the world you can trust. They're all the state. The state isn't just government. The state is government plus corporations. And you could say things like plus churches and all these things, but most churches are 501c3s or whatever. Anytime they ask for permission to do business from the state, they're part of the state. They've incorporated with the state. It's the state. So as an agorist, as an anarchist myself, I see every corporation out there as just another extension of the state. I'm not just anti-government. I am anti-state. Okay, now I believe in business. I believe in companies and all that stuff, but any business, any company that has incorporated with the state is a part of the state. Don't trust it. So you can't trust it with your software. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people now that are like really into solutions, right? Oh, we know that the state is spying on us. We know that like they're watching everything we do. What do I do about it? And then unfortunately, there's a lot of these corporations and businesses that are coming out and they're trying to sell you something like, oh, just install this, install this software, and that'll help protect your emails from spying. It'll help protect you from this, that, or the other. Okay, one example is Silent Circle. Okay, now I don't really know much about them. I don't care to know much about them, but they're selling you something, and I don't trust them. Even though it's got big names in it, like Phil Zimmerman, who has a history of encryption and all these things. I don't trust them because it's too centralized. It's too centralized. It's closed source software. It's not free software they're selling us. It's just more proprietary software. They're a legal corporation. You can't trust them, period. So the solutions really are free software. And I'll get to that a little bit later. And I'll take questions later, too. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is just a couple examples of how I've incorporated this in my life. There's an operating system called Linux. Okay, there's Macintosh, there's Microsoft, and there's Linux, and there's also something called OpenBSD. But there's Linux, and Linux is really a free operating system. Okay, it's what powers your whole computer. I first used Linux in like 2004. I was living in Germany, and at the time, everybody knows all the Germans are all a bunch of socialists. And I first started using Linux. They used Linux at the physics building. I studied physics, and they were using Linux in the physics building. And I started to use it. I tried using it, and I was like, this sucks. Like, it wasn't user friendly. You had to type in a bunch of things into a command prompt in order to get anything to run. The Germans really liked it, but I just figured, they're all a bunch of socialists. They have no idea what they're talking about. Microsoft is, yes, it's better to pay for things. Okay, so that was my first experience with Linux. So chances are a lot of people have used Linux once way in the past, and they didn't have a pleasant experience. Well, I'm here to tell you that Linux is way easier to use now than it has been way back in the day. So if you did have a bad experience with Linux 10, 15 years ago, just please give it a try again because it's way better than it used to be. I didn't use Linux again until like 2009. My old computer, it was like 5 years old, and it started going on the fritz. I was getting the blue screen of death all the time. It was really slow, lagging, and my wife, she said, why don't you try installing Linux on there? And I was like, Linux? I've tried that before. It sucks. It's terrible. I don't want to use that. And she's like, oh, just give it a try. I've used it before. I really liked it. So I installed Linux on my old computer, and my old computer, which I was about ready to go buy a new computer, my old computer was like brand new again. I mean, no more blue screen of death. Everything was working great. It was fast. It was easy. I was like, wow, this resurrected my computer. That computer, which was 5 years, old 5 years ago, I'm still using it today. It's not the main computer I use, but it's still a perfectly good computer I use for a lot of things. And so a lot of people, they think to themselves, my computer's crapping on me. It's time to go buy a new computer. False. Okay, 95% of the time when your computer is crapping out on you, it's the software. It's not the hardware. The memory, the hard drive, the motherboard, all that stuff is still working really well. It's the software, and chances are it's Microsoft. Okay, so give Linux a try. I think you'll be happy with it nowadays, anyways. So I've been using Linux for about 5 years. I started off with Ubuntu. Ubuntu is probably one of the most popular distributions of Linux. For a lot of people that don't know what a distribution is, think of like Microsoft. There's XP, there's Vista, there's Windows 7, Windows 8, and all that. Well, with Linux, because it's free and open source software, there isn't just one distribution by one company. There's no just one company that puts out Linux. It's just a huge community of people that are constantly tweaking the software to meet their needs. And Ubuntu happens to be one of the most popular distributions out there. It is put out by a company. The company is called Canonical. I used Ubuntu first. I used them for a couple years. I really liked it. It wasn't until I learned more about free software that I realized that even Ubuntu has non-free software that comes packaged with it. And I said, oh, okay, well, how can I get an operating system that's 100% free software? And that's when I started learning about things like the Free Software Foundation and they have a bunch of recommended distributions that are 100% free software. I actually now run a distribution called Debian. Okay, Debian is not a free software recommended distro. It's a long story. I won't get into it, but the initial install when you first start running Debian, it's 100% free software. The kernel, everything. Okay, so I run an operating system now that is 100% free software. I don't have any non-free software on the main computer I use. That's the computer I use for emails. It's the computer I store all my images on. It's the one I use for my Bitcoins. It's for everything. Okay, that is a computer that doesn't have any non-free software on there. And not only is it like an ethical computer, right, because it doesn't rely on the guns of government or anything like that, it's also really a secure computer. And that's, I think, there's two main reasons why people would want to use free software. If you're like me and you don't believe in intellectual property, it's the ethical reason, right? I'm not supporting any companies out there by running non-free software. I'm not, and their non-free software is backed by the guns of government, so it's ethical, okay? And then the really big one, probably the one that motivates me the most, is the security, okay? It's the security factor. It's the fact that I feel confident that there's no keyloggers on my computer. I feel confident that, of course, it's a desktop. It doesn't have a built-in webcam or built-in microphone, but if there were, I would feel confident that, it's not listening to me or watching everything I do all the time in my house, okay? I do have another computer. It's the old computer I told you about before. It's resurrected. It's running something called Linux Mint, okay? Linux Mint is a different distribution. There's hundreds and hundreds of distributions of Linux. It's called Linux Mint. The reason why I run it is because it does have some non-free software on there. However, I use that computer for one thing only pretty much, and that's to stream videos, okay? Unfortunately, it can be a little bit difficult to stream certain videos online if you don't have some non-free software. The non-free software is called Flash. That's where most people sell out, and I'm a sellout too, I'll admit it. I'm working on weaning myself from it, okay? But at least on the main computer that I need for like all my super duper security, it doesn't have any non-free software. I don't even have Flash installed. But if I want to watch certain streaming videos, I have to have Flash installed. So I put that on my old crummy computer. That computer also doesn't have a built-in microphone or webcam in it. Okay, I don't have any sensitive materials on there. It's just for streaming. Okay. However, the company that I work for, I work from home. I'm a remote customer support person, and my company recently sent everybody in the company, everybody who works for them, free Chromebooks. So I got a Chromebook in the mail a few months ago, and the very first thing I did, I know that it has a built-in webcam and a built-in microphone in it. Before I even powered that thing up once, I disassembled it, and I removed the built-in webcam and the built-in microphone. Because one thing I will not tolerate in my house is a built-in microphone and a built-in webcam. The idea that not only the feds, because we all know that it's not just the United States federal government, it's anybody. If the ability exists, anybody can do it. The thought of having, all of my conversations listened to, and the thought of being stared at all the time, it's repugnant to me. And it should be repugnant to anybody, especially libertarians. So the first thing I did is I removed the webcam and the microphone from it, and I use the Chromebook to this day. I don't use it for anything other than work. I don't go and email my friends on it. I don't YouTube videos. I don't do anything on there. It's just work related, because not only can the state spy on me, but my company could spy on me. Google could spy on me. It's a Google, it's a Google computer. So those are some of the things I've done to reduce my espionage footprint, so to speak. I used to have a smartphone. I really loved it. It was an Android. It's really flashy and cool, and it was nice to be able to do things with it. But I got rid of it over a year ago, and life goes on. I've been fine without it. The reason why I got rid of it was because I know that it has 2 built-in webcams and a built-in microphone, and you have absolutely no control over this phone. You can turn it off, they can turn it on. You think you've done something to mitigate things like maybe you'll install something like Text Secure, or some program that you can send encrypted messages back and forth, encrypted SMSs to your friends using Text Secure. Okay, the problem with The problem with a lot of the stuff, I love Tor, I love GPG, I love all these things that really help us to, encrypt our communications. That's awesome. But the problem is that it's all for naught. It's all garbage. It's all garbage. It's like building a skyscraper on quicksand. It doesn't matter how awesome your technology is if you're built on a non-free operating system. If there's any non-free software in your device, period, the entire thing is jeopardized. Just get it out of your head. You can't go searching Tor and think that you're safe if you're on Microsoft, period. Just get it out of your head, because they have keyloggers built inside of them. They have screen. They can capture everything that's on your screen, okay? So the first thing you need to do, if you want to take your online security, if you want to take your computer security seriously, is do 100% free software. 100%. Debian or any other free software recommended distribution. And then start building on top of that. But don't build a skyscraper on a foundation of quicksand. Okay? You're going to be sorely disappointed. One of the also things that I really like about the free software activism that I do, and should really appeal to a lot of anarchists, is that it's a risk-free form of activism. Okay? So many things that we do as anarchists involve some form of risk. Okay, I drive without permission. I've been driving for nearly 4 years without a license. There's the risk that I can go to jail. If I ever get pulled over, which I haven't yet, thank God, but if I ever do get pulled over, I'm going to jail. That is not risk-free activism, okay? I also don't pay income taxes. There's a chance in the future I will go to a federal penitentiary. I hope to God it doesn't happen. I hope the state doesn't exist. I hope that it dies really soon, and I don't ever have to worry about that. That's not risk-free activism, okay? Using 100% free software is risk-free activism. Nobody is going to throw you in a cage for using free software, okay? You're not going to get fired for using free software. Nobody's going to look down their nose at you. Nobody's going to make fun of you for running free software, okay? Furthermore, it doesn't cost anything. A lot of activism costs money. If you donate to a campaign, or you donate to a website like the EFF, or you donate to something that you really like, that costs money. Okay, free software doesn't cost any money. It's going to save you a lot of money. You don't have to pay for the newest version of Microsoft Windows. You don't have to pay for every little update in your Mac store. Okay, so it's going to save you money, and it's risk-free activism. Think about that for a minute. Okay, so what else? If you start to get into the free software community, you might start noticing things when you go to like websites. Let's say you go to the Debian website. You say, okay, I want to install Debian Linux on my computer. I'm ready. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to Debian.org or whatever it is, and you're going to look at the website, and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is a really plain-looking website. This doesn't have any of the normal frills that I'm used to. Where's all my pop-ups and cool imagery? And it's just going to be words on a computer screen. That's all it's going to be. There's a reason for that. One of which, it's an old website, and it takes a lot to totally revamp the website, okay? But the real reason is that a lot of free software community websites, they're going to be stripped down for a reason. And the reason is that a lot of software that you've come to enjoy on a lot of websites, they all use non-free JavaScript, okay? JavaScript is software that runs on your computer, okay? It goes through your browser, but it sort of runs on your computer, and that's like really deep, free. If you're like really hardcore free software, then you start worrying about that. I wouldn't say worry about the JavaScript, the non-free JavaScript yet, but there is a reason. It's because these free software, websites, they respect your freedom, and they don't expect you to run any non-free software on your computer through their website, okay? So I just want you to know that just because you get a really lame-looking website, it doesn't mean that the software you're about to install on your computer is lame. Actually, I find Debian, I really do think it's a lot more awesome than Windows. I think that it's just a superior product. Not only is it ethical, not only is it safe, but just the use of Debian is just, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's way more fun than anything I've used on any other proprietary system, personally. It didn't always used to be that way. Like I said, 10 years ago, it was a real pain. It wasn't a lot of fun, but it's a real pleasure now. So think about that. So now I'd like to get back, now that I've given you all this like half-hour lecture on, you know, how we're all basically spies, we're all a bunch of finks, we're all a bunch of, you know, feds, we're all unwittingly we're spies for the feds. Now that we all know that, who here would willingly go to their friend's house, go to their family member's house, walk into the Keen Activist Center or the Quill or any activist center where there's a bunch of activists whose lives are on the line all the time, who are constantly at risk for spending years of their life in jail for non, you know, victimless crimes, who here now would willingly walk in on those people wearing a mobile device like a smartphone or a laptop that contains any non-free software, who is essentially, you know, wearing a wire for the feds? Now I'd like you to raise your hands. Who would be willing to do that? Raise your hands. Okay, we got one person who's honest. We got three people who are honest. All right? You have something to think about now, all right? Because you are spies for the feds. So, from this point on, you could do a couple things. What you might do is, if you're not quite ready to give up all of the non-free software, okay, I'm going to go into my friend's house, I'm going to leave my smartphone in the car. Just don't be a spy. Don't be a fink. Okay? Don't be a fink for the feds. All right? If you're willing to have, you know, built-in webcams and built-in microphones that can listen and watch everything you do in your house, hey, that's your prerogative. Okay? I sure as hell won't do that. But if you want to do that, fine. Just don't do it in anybody else's house. Or if you are going to do it, tell them. Be like, hey, I'm wearing a wire for the feds. You know, I'm wearing a wire for the feds. You okay with that? Just let them know. All right? All right, so that's my lecture. Thank you for all sitting through my half hour of lectureness. I'm going to thank you. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and take questions now. I saw there were several people that had questions. You first. What? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. For anybody who didn't hear that on the camera or whatever, the question was: is there such a thing as a smartphone or a cell phone that is 100% free software friendly? And the answer is no, there isn't. There isn't. I'd have it if there was. One of my, one of the real pioneers of the free software movement is a man named Richard Stallman. He's kind of like Ron Paul, who's been saying the same message for 30 years, and for 29 years, people laughed at him. A very, very small niche of people took him seriously and understood that he was right on the money, and only in the last couple years have people started to be like, wow, this guy who's been preaching the gospel for 30 years about free software was right. And 10, 15 years ago, Richard Stallman was warning everybody, those cell phones are tracking devices. He would often call them as Stalin's dream. You know, it's Stalin's dream, what you've got there. And I love cell phones. I love smartphones. I can't wait to get a smartphone. In fact, there are people out there that are working on building a 100% free software smartphone. And it will happen. Okay, we'll get there. We're not there yet, and that's why I don't have one. But I'll tell you what, the day it comes out, I'm buying one because I want it. I love the idea. I'm not. Pardon me? Later this year. I mean, it's coming out soon. Okay. I'm not a technophobe. I'm not anti-technology. I love technology. I think it's got a lot of great stuff going for us, okay? But I want to do it right, okay? And that's one of the things that's really important because in the future, we're seeing a lot of really amazing things coming on. And we've got self-driving cars coming online. We're going to be having, like, live-in robots coming up here. We're going to be having, you know, all sorts of things that are involved with us. You know, nowadays people wear cameras on their glasses, you know, Google glasses. I mean, technology is, in a big way, going to be a part of everybody's lives. It's going to be a part of our banking, you know, with Bitcoin, it's going to be a part of everything. We've got to do it right. And if you just have this lackadaisical attitude like, oh, it's okay, it's not free software, big whoop, you know, there's one thing Richard Stallman always says, and that is either you control the program or the program controls you. And we know who controls the program, okay? If you've got non-free software on any of your devices, it's not you, it's the state. And if we want to fight the state, you cannot fight the state if they know everything you're saying in the comfort of your home. I mean, you look at like World War II, you know, the Americans versus the Germans. The Americans knew everything the Germans were doing. They encrypted, you know, they had Enigma. They encrypted everything. They unencrypted everything. So it was pretty easy for the Americans to win when they could know everything the Germans were up to, everything they were planning, everything they were doing 5 minutes before they were going to do it. So how are we ever going to beat the state? How are we ever going to win if they can listen to everything we're up to, everything we're planning? Well, they've already got us beat. Toast. All right. No. There, it is technically, I think, possible to install Linux, free software like Debian on a Macintosh, but I have found that it is so brutal and so it's not really worth the time. You would have to be like a master user to install it on there because a lot of they're doing this nowadays. Is a lot of companies they're building the hardware in such a way where free software just can't communicate with it. It's just not free software friendly hardware. You can. I know it's possible. Okay. Yep. But Ubuntu contains non-free software, so that's the thing. Even Ubuntu contains blobs in the kernel. There's only a handful of. My understanding is you do. My understanding is that even Ubuntu, but okay, regardless, technically you could do it. Okay, I recommend not doing it. I recommend taking the Mac and selling it and getting a brand new computer. And actually, there are several companies that sell computers specifically designed for free software. Okay, and one of them is a company called Think Penguin. Think Penguin is another company that if you visit the website, you're going to be like, wow, this doesn't look cool at all. You know, I'm used to like Dell or Apple where it's got all the flash. No, Think Penguin is a very like stripped down website because they don't run any non-free JavaScript, you know, that violates user, you know, takes away users' freedom. So I'd recommend a company called Think Penguin, and they sell laptops, they sell desktops, they sell all sorts of things that specifically are known to run with free software. So I highly recommend, and they'll even ship it to you with Linux pre-installed, any distribution you want. That's what I recommend personally. So okay, so the question was, how do you know they haven't corrupted a computer? You don't. You don't. I mean, it is feasible, and the feds have been known to intercept people's computers en route and install something on there. But you know what? Even if they do that, that is way more cumbersome, way more resource intensive than just it automatically by default all of the computers having software that can spy on them. So, what was your question? You had a question. We'll go to you. Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, there is, and I mean, unfortunately, I I don't have a computer. I don't have a computer that's built on open hardware. I don't think really anybody does. That being said, it's a goal we're striving towards, and there are a lot of people, you know, like myself and like others that are really, hey, wait a minute, you know, I want the software to be open source. Or excuse me, I want the hardware to be open source. I want to be able to replicate it in my home. Why can't I create my own microchip in my own 3D printer or whatever? And why can't I know how to communicate with? I mean, yeah, the open hardware movement is nascent, but it's growing. And 5 years, you'll be seeing a lot of open hardware computers on the market as well. I believe, I hope that's what we have to work towards. We have to really demand it. So that's a good question. It's serious for sure. You. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, how do you explain Google straddling both sides of this equation? Because in a lot of ways, Google does rely on they do rely on free software. You know, there's the Linux kernel in just about everything. Everybody uses Linux to some extent. But what they'll do is they'll take something good and pure at the very beginning, and then they'll just corrupt the hell out of it, and they'll build something that's just evil on top of it. And so that's what a lot of companies do, like Google, like Apple. They'll start off with something good like Linux, and just because you start off with an operating system that's good doesn't, or the kernel that's good doesn't mean that's what's built on top of the kernel. It doesn't mean that's good. So I mean, you've really got to be diligent about from the ground up, being 100% free software. And yeah, Google might start pushing some things like end-to-end encryption with GPG or something like that. To me, that's all for naught because I want 100% free software. And if there's anything that can override, if there's anything that can keylog, if there's anything that can take pictures of my screen, what do I care if it's been encrypted end-to-end? They can read it anyways. So no, I don't trust Google at all. I consider them just as part of the state. They've sold out. Yeah, cool. They've done some neat software things. And I know that there are a lot of people that work for Google and are in Google that really share my views. Okay, they're working for them because they cut them a paycheck and all that. And maybe on the side, their day job is working for Google, and at night they're hacking away at free software. I mean, you can find good people in all aspects of life for sure. But the company itself, Google, it's just part of the state. It's just a corporation. So I don't trust them at all. I don't want anything to do with them personally. What's your question? Okay. Uh, okay. So the question doesn't really. It's a little bit. It's a little bit out of the scope of what we're dealing with, but the question was, what do I do with my email? Well, I actually do have my own email server. But that being said, you don't necessarily have to have your own email server. If you've got a computer that's built on 100% software, and you don't have to worry about any malware, any government backdoors, any spyware, anything like that, then you can have, end-to-end encryption. You could be using Gmail, which are total sellouts. We know everything that goes through Gmail is being read by the feds. But if you end-to-end encrypt it on your computer, and the person you're sending it to, I mean, now it's difficult because you're talking about another degree of difficulty. But if the person you're sending it to also has a 100% free software computer with end-to-end encryption, yeah, you can be reasonably sure that your communications at that point are secure. No, no. If you're sending end-to-end encryption, if you're sending it encrypted end-to-end, no. Gmail, all they get is a bunch of gobbledygook. They can't read what you're writing. So that's what we need to work towards. So what's your question? Okay, so this is a question that's a little bit off topic. Well, it's not terribly off topic, but it's the question of OpenBSD versus Linux. I'm not going to get into that debate, honestly, because I've never used OpenBSD. It might be superior. My understanding, though, is that there aren't any BSD distributions that are 100% free software. None of the BSD distributions have been recommended by the Free Software Foundation because all of them do contain binary blobs in the kernel. Okay, they all have sold out a little bit. Okay, and the Free Software Foundation, if you want to really stick to your guns and use 100% free software, use a Free Software Foundation recommended distribution. Mine is not Free Software recommended distribution. It's called Debian. It's not. And the reason why is because they actually do allow you to install non-free software, but it doesn't come you actually have to really go out of your way to get this. So that's one reason why they were excluded from, and that's sort of a bit of a debate I'm not going to get into, but by my standards, Debian is 100% free software. It doesn't contain any non-free software. I'm perfectly happy with it. But the debate between BSD and Linux, that's a debate that I'm not going to even broach because it's not worth it for the topic of free software. So personally, so you've got a question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. A lot of people want to use servers, and Linux is used for servers. I think most of the servers in the world are running Linux. Um, I do have a website. I built it before I became like 100% free software junkie. And I first built it on a virtual private server. I built it from scratch and all that stuff. But I've since moved over. I would host my own website from my own computer at home if I could, if I could get the bandwidth. The problem is that, bandwidth from your own home is difficult to get, so you end up having to contract it out to something like, Namecheap or GoDaddy or something like that. That's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate way the system is right now. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. It's a goal that we need to work towards, something better. But unfortunately, yeah, if you need to have a website or something like that, you're going to have to use third-party services probably, in which case you're screwed somewhat. Sorry, but it's a goal to work towards. Nobody's going to be perfect. My goal in this talk is to hopefully, out of the audience here today and anybody at home watching this, if I could just get one person to take this stuff seriously and to say, hey, okay, I might not be Richard Stallman tomorrow, but it's something I'm going to start working towards. Debian, you might start off with Linux Mint, which does contain non-free software, but maybe is a little bit user-friendly for newbies, Linux newbies. You might start off there, and it might take you 2 or 3 years before you switch to Debian, and it'll take you a few more years. I mean, it's a process where nobody's going to be an angel tomorrow. You just got to work towards it, and 5 years from now, you'll look back and you're like, wow, I've learned a lot about the free software community. I've learned a lot about how to secure my communications and how to protect from, all these things. There's an old saying I really like, and that is the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, but the second best time to plant a tree is today. So don't worry about the fact that you've been bad. Don't worry about the fact that you've been a spy for the feds unwittingly. Forget it. Get over it. Start doing the right thing today. Okay? You got a question again. Yeah, WordPress. The question is there an open source WordPress? WordPress is free software. Okay, WordPress is awesome. I highly recommend it if you're going to run a blog. And the other question is, do I have a cell phone? I do not. No, all the cell phones are compromised, so I don't have any of them. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, I have to live without it, but there are ways around that. For example, if you have a laptop that's got 100% free software on there, all you need is a Wi-Fi hotspot, and bam, you can use voice over IP, through Skype alternatives like Jitsi or Pigeon or something like that. So I can communicate. I can have voice video chats with anybody. So yeah, as long as you've got a Wi-Fi hotspot, think of that as your cell tower. But yeah, unfortunately, I go without the cell phone. I know most people aren't going to do that, okay? But at least now that you've got it in your mind, if you start with something, start with your desktop. And then once you've got your desktop down, then maybe move to your laptop. Then move to your mobile device. Like I said, like this gentleman said, end of the year, you're going to start seeing devices that are 100% free software friendly. Right now, there's attempts. There's things like Cyanogen Mod. There's attempts. Even they still have to require they still require some non-free software. But eventually, there's going to be a cell phone, a smartphone that comes out that's something I will buy. Just keep an eye out for it. Look for it. Tell people this is what I want. Tell the companies. Demand this is what I want. And when you're ready for it, get it. So like I said, most people probably aren't going to give up their cell phones today, but you can leave it in your car when you go to a friend's house or something. I don't know. It depends on how much you respect your friends, their privacy. And if you're not going to, you just be like, hey, I'm bringing in some spyware. Are you okay with that? If they say yeah because they're running spyware, hey, we can all just be things for the feds. We don't care. It's fine. All right, next question. Anybody? You got a question? So virtualization is not something I'm too terribly familiar with. I know what it is. I understand. I've never really had a use for it. A lot of people would do it if they had like Microsoft Windows and they want to use it for all their games and such, and then they want to be able to boot into a Linux machine. You can do that. Okay, fine. I started off dual booting. A dual boot is when at the time of boot up, you decide whether or not you want to go into Microsoft or go into Linux. You can do that. It's a good start, You're not going to go from zero. Nobody's going to go from 0 to 100% free software overnight. It's just not going to happen. One thing I recommend, people do is when you're first getting started out, chances are almost everybody runs non-free or runs free software right now. If you're running Firefox on Microsoft Windows, you're running free software. Firefox is free software. What I would recommend doing is start seeing if you can find alternatives to what you're currently running. Like, okay, you're running Skype. Most people use Skype. You want to instant message and talk with people online? Hey, is there a Skype alternative? Go into your search, your web search, and type in Skype free software alternative, and you'll see a list. There's something called Jitsi. Jitsi it uses free protocols. It's free software, and then that way you can feel confident that if you're having a conversation with somebody around the world, using Jitsi instead of Skype, it's a private conversation. That's pretty awesome. So what I would do is see if you don't Google search. I actually use something called DuckDuckGo. It's not perfect, but it's better. Web search, alternative, blank alternatives. Internet Explorer, free software alternatives. Skype, free software alternatives. Outlook, free software alternatives. And then another thing to do is when you run across, this is something a newbie should always do if they're ready to start, getting into free software. Is you might not have the willpower to give up the non-free software that you're addicted to, but what you can do is you can say, from this day on, I will not use any new non-free software, because there's all sorts of non-free software popping up all the time. It's really cool, and it can do this, that, and the other. From now on, you say to yourself, oh, there's this new program. It looks really cool. I want to install it. Ask yourself, is it free software? So what you do is you look it up on Wikipedia, and right on the right-hand side of Wikipedia, it'll tell you what its license is. Is it a free software license, like GPL or MIT or something like that? And you're going to have to learn the lingo. But you can, if you do a little bit of research, hey, is this free software? Yes, it is. Great, I'll install it. I'll use it. Is this free software? No, it's not. No, thank you. Just don't get addicted to it from the start. You're still addicted to your non-free software. Just don't use any new non-free software, and eventually you'll get to wean yourself off of it. What's your question? Yeah, yeah. That's a good question. Hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely. Right, right. No, absolutely, I agree completely. And what he says for anybody on the online is the other approach is take responsibility for ourselves instead of only saying I'm not going to take a non-free software into a friend's house. You know, um, if somebody comes into your house, just say, hey, leave your phone in the car for me, please. Leave your laptop in the car for me. I don't want any non-free software in my house. And then also um, separating your non-free software on certain things, and that's what I do. Like, I have one computer. It's got Linux Mint, which contains Flash. It contains non-free software, but I don't do anything on there. I don't communicate. I don't email. I don't have any pictures, or I don't have any bitcoins. I don't have anything on there. It's just for streaming. The really big thing here, I think, is that it's bad enough with non-free software that they can keylog everything. The real thing is the built-in microphones and webcams. If you've got a Mac that you really like, or yeah, I guess what you'd have to do is you'd have to remove the built-in webcam, and it's totally doable. Just go online, get the instructions. Yeah, you can put tape. You can put tape over the webcam. You can't put tape over the microphone, because I don't care. I don't care how much you try and dampen it with cotton balls or something. They've got sophisticated enough. They can take the scratchiest of sounds and decode it. You got a question? Mm-hmm. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry. Sorry. What's your question? Yeah, yeah. That's good. I mean, and for people at home, you could feasibly, do a kill switch for your camera and microphone. That's possible if you're tech savvy enough to do something like that. I encourage you. Really, the main point of this talk was just number one, introduce people to free software if they've never heard of it before. Number two, know what the threats are of non-free software. Once a person fully internalizes the threats of non-free software, sure, you might not be able to get rid of the non-free software, but you can find workarounds like disabling the webcam and the microphone, like leaving the phone in your car, like not letting people bring it in your house. As long as we are aware of the threat, that's like step number one. The first part of solving the problem is knowing you've got the problem, okay? And then the third part of this talk was just being introduced, like how do you get started, and it's hard. It's going to be a several year process. I've been using non-free software, been using Linux for 5 years. I still consider myself a noob, in many ways. I still got a lot to learn. It's a lifelong process. That's okay. Start. That's all that's important. We're just about out of time. I'll take one more question, and then the hour's up. So, you got a question? Yeah. Did you say you're already running Ubuntu? Okay. Yeah. If you're running Ubuntu, you're already ahead of like 99% of the population. That's huge. Okay. But if you're ready to go like the distance, I would recommend doing anything that's a free software foundation recommended distribution, or my personal favorite is Debian. Okay, look at Debian, Debian. Look at Debian. That is pure free software, and I think it's better personally. Ubuntu is buggy. Install it and check it out, and yeah, do that. So, all right, I really appreciate everybody coming today. I really didn't expect this many people. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.